Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast. My name is Melissa, and this is Sammy. We are diving deep into conversations that connect and inspire. Stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Stories that take us to the heart of human connection. Please note that opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast. Please listen with your kindness and an open mind. Each story shared is authentic and vulnerable. Let's embrace our differences with empathy, knowing every voice enriches us. Together, let's cultivate a community of respect and curiosity. Thank you for listening. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired.
Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast, everybody. Today we are here with Jessica Janzen. We are very excited to have Jessica Janzen. I'll be totally honest with you. Melissa, when we first started our podcast, we had not released a single episode yet. And Melissa sent me your Instagram page and was like, I would love to have her on the podcast. I was like, cool, well, we just started, so let's chill.
Let's get at least an episode out.
Yeah.
She was like, cool your heels. Maybe we need to start slow here.
So they have 5 episodes out. No, I'm just kidding.
It wasn't even one yet.
Not
even
even
like, this person.
Yeah.
It's like,
No,
you
I
need to
love
go
it.
check her out.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right?
And I'm happy to be here. I mean, I feel like we're very distanced, but I'm like,
Right, I know, right?
So I was super game, but I was like, I need to figure out editing. We need to figure out logistics of recording before we get a good. So we made our brothers and sisters go through those early ones. Anyways, Jessica Janzen. She is a keynote speaker, a mother, a wife, a business coach, an SMA advocate, and an author of a book, Bring the Joy. We are so excited to have her here today. I already mentioned how we came across you, and I know Melissa really wants to just say a couple things, but...
say it, Melissa, say it.
All the things? Oh, God. I'm like, okay, so I was, in preparing for today, I was like, oh my gosh, we both read your book. I've been following for a while. We're so excited for you to come. And then I was like, wait, I want to ask you a million questions. There's so many things I want to talk about. I'm like, I want to talk about Rachel Hollis. I want to talk about all the things. I want to talk about Start the Day. I want to talk about all of these things. I am so... all the things I want to talk about. And then at the same time, we are doing this SMA Awareness Month, and that is where we're going to feature you. So I messaged Sammy. Sorry, I have to clear my throat. Sammy.
Clear it.
It's all good. You're the one talking. It's just if someone else is talking. It's
Right? And so I'm like, I want us to, we want to talk about SMA, obviously. And it's going to be hard. I was saying, I'm like, this is maybe the first time I'm like, it's going to be hard to hold back on some things because I just want to talk about all the things with you. We could sit here for 8 hours and talk about all the things. And
we both have long lists of questions
right?
to ask you about other things.
So let's get after it. Let's tackle what we can tackle, and if we have to,
Right?
then there's a part 2. I'm willing to do that.
Oh my gosh.
And I think it's great to focus on SMA because that's what we're trying to raise awareness
Right.
for, and I'm happy to share that. But we can also refer people back to to dive in on that. So I'd say ask all the questions. I'm here to answer them as best I can.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much. So why don't we start here? Why don't you tell us, because we've read the book and we know the story, but can we start on what your very first entrance into how you found out about SMA? Can we start there?
Totally. I do think it's an amazing place to start because even at the fundraiser that you guys were at this year, we celebrate my son Lewiston's birthday every year. At that fundraiser, so many people didn't know that part of my story. They're like, wait, what? They're like, oh, I thought it was just your son. So I moved to Calgary in 2006, had a few different jobs, was trying to find my footing. I moved here with $300. I share this story all the time. Total idiot. Put my first and last month's rent on my line of credit, which was like trying to pay off a credit card. Anyways, all the dumb things that we do in our 20s, we're like, oh, I really should have learned budgeting. So a year after I moved here, I had left the job. I had said, this isn't the fit. It was a toxic culture. I wasn't down for it. And so I had done well at the job. I was selling boats. I was selling wakeboard and water ski boats. And so I was making commission. And that was when Calgary's economy was booming. So when I quit, I was like, I don't have to race to another job. Had I been smart, I would have just put all of that money onto the credit card and line of credit and then just immediately had a job. But I'm not smart like that. I'm an idiot. And so in between this, and again, this just shows you it's gone exactly how it was meant to go. So in that, I was with some friends and I was like, oh, I can't believe I can't find a job. I'm so great. I know I'm hardworking. I want to pour my energy, my time, my gifts into a company and help make it better. And I'm very driven. I love working. I'm going to become a CEO of a large company, travel the world. That's my plan. And so I hadn't found my footing, and my girlfriend and I were driving to church, and she goes, well, what do you know you want to do? And what do you know you don't want to do? Like, make a pros and cons list. And I said, well, one thing I know I'd never want to do is work with handicapped kids. And I don't even know why I said that, where I said that. Like, I hadn't gone to school for that. I wasn't in the industry, or I was in sales, marketing, operations. Like, it's crazy. And so I blurted that out. And, we kept on going on the list. A week later to that date, essentially, my girlfriend also volunteered at the church that we worked at. I was in the young adults ministry. She was in the, kids ministry. And so she's like, oh, we're short. Can you come and help? And I had a criminal record check. It was a big mega church. And so I was like, yeah, happy to help. So they throw me into this classroom of 5 and 6-year-old boys. I see this little boy that is in a wheelchair stuck in the corner, and his hands are so weak he can't push the wheelchair. And so all of these boys are running around as boys do before, the formal program starts. I just said to him, hey, can I push you around? And so I just started racing this kid around. Didn't even connect the dots about what I had said a week earlier. Like, none of this is registering. Anyways, we have all this fun. This poor kid, I didn't know what he had, but he's cognitively so there. He just really weak body. And he ends up his head would fall over and be like, miss, can you pick up my head? And so then I would pick up his head and be like, okay. And then, we run around, it would fall over, do it again. And at the end of class, I just had this nudge. You can attribute it to whatever I say. It's, I'm a person of faith. So I'm like, oh, that's God's voice being like, go do this thing. And it was go tell this family that you can help them. You don't have a job to go to on Monday, Sunday. Just say you want to help. And so I meet the dad. He's like, can you wait for my wife? She walks over and she's rolling up a wheelchair with another little girl who's also in this wheelchair. I was like, hey, my name's Jess. I promise I'm not a psycho or literally, or like a murderer. I'm like, I have a criminal record check. I have a clean record. I just want to serve your family. I was like, I can scrub your toilets. I can play with your kids. I'm sure that this is probably challenging, exhausting. I have lots of energy. That's my secret weapon and my gift. And so the mom's like, oh my gosh, when can you start? And I was like, I don't know, tomorrow, tonight. What do you need? And she's like, tomorrow, 9 a.m. And so then I started serving this family, and it was just their nanny had just left, and the caregiver that they had. And so they were in this and they hadn't found someone. So I just filled the gap for a month. Amazing. And I remember after that first day, I got back into my car. I can picture, it was a silver Mazda 3. I remember closing the door and the tears just started flowing. And I was like, holy shit. My entire life, I have never been thankful for my legs. I've never been thankful for my arms. I'm like, ugh, my legs are fat. My butt is big. Those are the things that a lot of females will think. Totally. And I just remember there just weeping. I remember where my cup holder was. I remember the sun shining down. I remember that I was in their driveway and I was like, pull it together. If they see you like this, they're going to think you are a psycho. And I just remember being like, whoa. I've had legs that I've never thought about. Oh, I can't get in and out of a car. I can't climb up a stair. I can't roll over in bed. I need someone to bring me a heavy glass of water. I just go get the water. I just go wipe my butt. I just walk over here. And so that for me shifted everything. And to be honest, I didn't even really know what they had. I don't even know if I asked in the first little bit. Found out that it was spinal muscular atrophy. Found out that they were told that they might not make high school, but these were healthy little kids. And Sean and Shania were 4 and 6 at the time, and they were exact scenario like this between a couch and a coffee table. They could monkey along and walk.
Whoa.
So you're like, okay. I'm like, oh, you need a ramp. You need me to carry up the stairs. No big deal. No idea. Fast forward, I've stayed in touch, brought them to my parents' farm, brought them on trips, brought them to ride John Deere tractors and do all the fun farm things. So cool. We finished fundraising for a wheelchair accessible van. They had this old Dodge Sprinter that in the winter wouldn't work. Couldn't get in and out with the ramp or the lift. The heat didn't work. And these poor kids are freaking freezing. And then it'd be minus 30 out and they'd either be stuck in the van or they'd be stuck outside. And then you're like, how do you get a 400-pound wheelchair plus my kid home? I was like, no, I will not have this. So we're doing the fundraisers. This is right when GoFundMe just started to become a thing, because this was in 2015, 2016. So 2015, we start these fundraisers. The very first fundraiser I did, we raised $640. And I felt like a failure. Only 13 people showed up. I was a spin instructor, and I could usually sell out my spin classes. And there was more open bikes than there was people on bikes. And I was like, how are we going to do this? And so we just kept plugging away, and eventually through the GoFundMe, some grants, and then, people who are good and a bunch of other people doing fundraisers. It wasn't just me. We had raised $44,000, and I have the picture on my phone right after my son was born, my second. So my goal was to be like, I have to finish this fundraiser before my son's born, because I know I'm going to be busy. My daughter was 13 months old when he was born, so like you're in the thick of it. They call it Irish twins essentially. So it's like, I don't have time to do more fundraisers. Like, we got to get this. He was 3 weeks old, and we went and got the check from the bank, because we were both on this bank account where all the funds went. Got them the check, they got the van, and then 3 weeks after that, my son was 6 weeks old, we go into the hospital in Winnipeg on a family vacation after seeing a chiropractor, thinking he was colicky, thinking that he had just maybe caught a cold and he was weak or had an infection. Ended up being spinal muscular atrophy. And when the doctors delivered the news to us, I was like, not concerned. Like, I'm like, okay. I'm like, I know 2 kids with it. Like, it'll be fine. I'm like, we know how to fundraise for a wheelchair accessible van. I know that we'll need a ramp. And that led to a very different conversation with our pediatric neurologist, which was no hope, no cure. Our role will be to keep your son comfortable. And you're like, cool.
Gut punch.
Yeah. And that was it. And I mean, that changed the course of our life forever. And so I was almost oblivious to it, because I had only seen one side of someone living with spinal muscular atrophy. And it's a rare disease, and many people don't know about it. And it was a wild journey.
When I read that part in your book, I was like, or read it, I was listening to it. I say read. Oops, jeepers, Melissa. Just fix my little tripod.
I like it. This is very resourceful. Yeah.
Right? When I listened to that part of the book, I think I rewound it about 18 times, because
You're like, is this a joke?
Like, what? Just that, like, I mean, you talk about, it's in the title of your book, To Follow the Nudges. That is so unreal that it would like
that she would have helped the 2 kids, and then this was also her son's
yeah,
diagnosis
like
as well. Is that what you mean?
Yes, like that part, because I did think that your journey into fundraising for SMA and awareness for SMA, I did think that started with Lewiston. So when I found out it started before, I was like,
years before.
What?
9 years earlier it started. Isn't that wild?
So wild.
I'll share this with you, and not to bulldoze you, but I wrote a book, and the whole point was to encourage people to follow the nudges of their heart. And every time I do it, I land up exactly where I'm meant to. The blessing that, you're maybe praying for or thinking of. And I don't do it because I'm like hoping to get something in return. I'm just doing it because it has led to abundant joy. That's why I'm with my husband. That's why that. But just this week, I had 2 nudges, and out of nowhere, I just want to encourage people to follow through, because I think we have like, some people are like, I wanted to say hi to you, but I was scared. I'm like, they had a nudge, come say hi. I'm like, I'm actually really friendly. Like, I don't want to bite. I'm not trying to say I'm like this hoo-ha, but I think you have an idea like, oh, I want to do this thing, but then we tell ourselves a story, or we're scared of the outcome because it's not guaranteed. And I just have like stopped caring what I think. And I sent this, I sent a note on Wednesday at just before 9 o'clock to my brother-in-law. And I said, a note to say I love you. I'm praying for you today for wisdom, discernment, and peace. And he goes, love you too. Thank you. And he says, how did you know I needed that? So boom. And then a random girl, she's not random, I know her, which I just had that up. Where'd it go? I know her. She is so talented. She's absolutely incredible. She's a local country musician here in our city. And I saw one of her reels that popped up, and I was like, dang, I want to just like, I had this on my heart to be like, because in my head, I'm like, how is she not like in Nashville recording, like super duper famous, getting a CMA, like all the things. And I said, I want you to know you are going to make it huge. Buckle up. I can feel the breakthrough. Like, it's insane. Keep going. You are so fabulous. And she goes, I really feel like I needed some encouragement today. How did you know? Thank you for this message. It means a lot. And then I just said, I had a nudge. I said, just keep going. The breakthrough that you deserve and are worthy of is coming. I will not let you quit. You're too good for it. And she goes, I'm actually recording 3 new singles, but it's so scary. And I needed this so much right now. Thank you for following your intuition. And it's not like her and I are besties. Like, I don't, but I'm just like, if people just pay attention to the damn nudges where it's like, and I'm like, the nudge is like holding the door open maybe for the older gentleman who's 90 that like, or asking, hey, can I carry your groceries to the car? Like, I don't think these are always, but it's like you nudge to text somebody, do it. 99.9% of the time, they are probably in a spot where they need it and they want you to take action on it. But we don't, I get busy, or I forget, or that seems stupid, or whatever it is.
Totally.
And I'm like, no, just do the thing. And every time, I mean, I look at my husband, I was nudged to follow him. And I'm like, I married Hot Ronnie, the most incredible, like faithful, loyal, fun, person that I could get. And it's because I didn't settle and I like was nudged to pursue him. So yeah, the blessings are great.
So cool.
I mean, nudges led to right today. Like literally
totally.
Right here,
Yes,
right,
100%.
We had at your event, we had gotten into the car and I was driving through the parking lot and I was like, I just got to pull over for a sec, and pulled back over and came back in.
Yes!
So,
yes! You're like, you wrote a book and this is the nudge. I remember that now.
And then you're like, have you read my book? I was like, no, I haven't read your book.
She hadn't even read your book yet. She's like,
no.
Mel, and here's me. I'm like,
you're like, don't go.
I'm
are you
like,
sure this is weird?
Really? We're doing this? She's like, we're doing it. I know.
And you read the book.
I hadn't read it
yet.
I had it on my list ready to read.
Okay, so isn't that so funny? So
isn't that amazing?
You told yourself a story.
Yes, I did.
What did you say in that moment? Like, this is embarrassing. Don't do it. We'll look like idiots.
Something like that.
Right? And you were just like, no,
Yeah.
I got this feeling.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like intuition that's inside of you. That's like moving you in the direction. I'm like, God, if people just paid more attention.
And she
to
did.
it.
She was like, nope. Like, we're doing this right now. And I was like,
the event.
Yeah, I left
wow.
the event, got
Yeah,
in
it
the car,
was
started
done.
driving, pulled back over, and came back in. And I was like, I just had this feeling I had to come in. And you were like, have you read my book? I was like, no. And then I read the back, and it's like, when you get those nudges? I was like, yeah, all right.
We were freaking out. We actually recorded. We were like on the phone recording. We were freaking out. We're like, she comes in. She's like, did you know about this?
So
like
good.
what? And also getting us there early. Like we totally nerded out and showed up at your event like early, like super early, which also led to today, really, in a way that like we weren't like, that was not, there was no intention behind us just wanting to show up early. And now we've done that twice at both events. Like here, Lewiston's birthday,
I'm notoriously early. So
we were an hour early and sat and danced in
And
a
here
car.
I was like 40 minutes late to record this podcast.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And meanwhile, you're like, damn it, people just be
No,
on time.
no.
She thinks it a little bit in her head, but she has
Just a little
patience.
bit.
Yeah,
I
we do.
A little bit.
Mine was not intentional. It was like I could have been more prepared and gone earlier to the auto body
No.
shop, but anyways, here we are.
I feel like it's only bad when it's like multiple times in a row, because we all have lives that we're living. But when someone is always
Totally. Then you're like, hey, you don't respect time, or like you do not know how to manage your time effectively. Totally. No, I used to always be notorious late, and now I've definitely worked to improve that. And then there's times when there's a few things you're like, you know what, I'm doing the best I can with where I'm at.
totally. Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. My kids are late for school every day. It's fine.
Me too.
There's the honesty,
Right?
Just because, anyways, that's a whole other story. Okay, I want to jump back into SMA for a second.
Yeah.
So prior to Lewiston, any fundraising you had done was for this family specifically. Is that correct?
Yeah, and like we had done a few events for the family. I was working at Jugo Juice. It's a smoothie company in Canada with head office based in Calgary. My actual uncle-in-law was the one that started it with his best friend, and that's where my husband and I met. And I took on the training and operations for the company. And so part of the training was you'd have franchisors come into the office and they would train for a week solid. And one of the things that I've always had a heart for giving back. Like that's just, I think, how I'm wired. And one of the things that we implemented was, how do you involve your local community to do good? Because who doesn't want to be part of a movement where you're doing good? And so that started in 2009, 2010 and 11, where when the franchise partners would come to train, we at the very end would make them execute an event. Like they'd have to canvas our local community. There was an office tower, go to the businesses, hand out, hey, we're going to do this thing, come in, like a smoothie by donation, I think it was. And like Stantec, a large engineering firm, there's people and resources. And we had one of the very first ones we did was to raise funds to buy 2 accessible bikes for Sean and Shania. And so that would probably have been one of my very first fundraisers and things that we'd done, and then helped with like a walk and roll that they did in the parks where we'd set up smoothies and just like ways that you can bless. Sometimes it's by raising some money, sometimes it's like using the talents. At that point we had smoothies, so we could do that. And so there's been multiple touch points, nothing crazy huge, but really fundraising for spinal muscular atrophy took off in a big way after Lewiston passed, and saying, oh man, there's such a need in this community. And the goal has always been to thank the hospital. I originally, when we did Lewiston's first birthday as a fundraiser, the goal was to write a check to the hospital for $10,000. We were not in the financial position to do that, but I just wanted to be like, $10,000 is like a big number and it seems cool. And I just want the hospital to know how grateful we were for every single like unit clerk and nurse and child life therapy and the music therapy and all of these different departments. And we have such a beautiful children's hospital in the city we live in. And I just want to keep those programs alive. And then we had raised so much money. I was like, oh, we can help the SMA community. Like Candace at the time needed an accessible vehicle. There was like, oh, these people need portable ramps. Oh, this is so expensive. And I had almost 10 years of evidence of watching this family, Ashawn and Shania, struggle to pay for the things that were required of medical families, where the government doesn't fund it, insurance doesn't fund it, and then you're kind of on the spectrum that then there's this massive gap. And it's like, well, what family has an extra $13,000 to pay for the upgrades that are really what I would say are a necessity, but other companies or industries or government doesn't deem them necessary. They're like, here's the basic. And you're like, well, the basic doesn't cut it. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to be able to help fill that gap. And we knew with our story, it was impacting people.
Yeah. Can we tell Lewiston's story? So we got to like...
Yeah. And I always wonder how much to share because I share this so much. And you're like, oh, I'm sure people have heard it. And I know you have lots of questions. So I'm going to do a condensed version. Sure. Then that way, if people want the full version, they can buy my book, Bring the Joy.
100%.
Or go listen to, I have a bunch of information on my Instagram and other pages. And it's all on our website. A lot of it is. So like I mentioned, and to rewind the clock, my husband and I were told you probably won't be able to have kids. I didn't get a regular period. I had endometriosis, celiac. And like because I maybe got a period a few times a year, I was struggling with a bunch of stomach gut issues, which ended up being endometriosis and celiac. I had been seeing an OBGYN for a bunch of this. I had that little surgery that they do where they scrape the lesions off of your whatever. I don't even know the medical stuff. And so she was aware kind of my situation. She was aware I didn't have a period. And so she was like, this might be difficult. So we got married in 2013. In 2014, we're like, okay, let's start talking about family planning. And she's like, listen, let's automatically rule out that Ronnie does or doesn't have working swimmers. So he got his tested and she's like, well, you're good to go. His swimmers are off the charts. We're like, awesome. And my husband, if you know his story, massive addiction issues, did a ton of cocaine and drank way too much. And so he had really been on a health journey himself and had totally tightened that up. And so that was a blessing to have that, okay, he's got, the good swimmers. And so we're like, okay, well, if it's going to take us 1 to 2 years to get pregnant, let's see what happens. So we go on a trip. I pulled the goalie and we got pregnant on this trip. We were in Europe with his whole family. It's a thing for his grandparents' anniversary. Had no idea. I was acting like a total psycho. And everyone's like, what's the problem with Jess? And it was my mother-in-law that was like, I bet you she's pregnant. And it turns out I was. And we almost got a divorce because I was a lunatic. Ronnie and I were struggling in our marriage. It was a whole thing. So I have my daughter Swayze, April 2015. I get pregnant 3-4 months later with Lewiston. And literally we're like, oh, is the time in the hotel in Edmonton or on our kitchen bar stools? That was it. Because you just had a baby. You're not having a ton of sex, but the sex we did have was it was this or this.
Totally.
And so we got pregnant again and we're like, holy. And I mean, honestly, I had quit my job. I didn't go back. I knew I wouldn't get a mat leave. I'm actually working on a brand called This Mom Recommends. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a mommy blogger. This was the era of the mommy bloggers. I had even to this day, it's called This Mom Recommends. I had a stamp made and I was like, I'm going to partner with brands. I'm going to share these things I love. I'm going to blow up and this is how I can stay at home with the kids and I'll be able to earn income and get for your stuff for the babies. This was ready to launch. I had a whole plan. I was like, I'll just have Lewiston, give myself a month and then I'll launch this. And we had planned to go on family vacation. We go back to Winnipeg, do our thing. And on that trip, Ronnie comes home and I decide to stay for extra help. And I was like, man, Lewiston's super colicky. And a friend had suggested going to a chiro. Go to the chiro. She takes one look, says he doesn't look good. and suggests I go to the hospital because he was like laboring to breathe, had mottled skin. Go into the hospital. I don't even call my husband. I'm like not worried, not concerned. Stop and get a coffee. Call my mom, like whatever, lackadaisical, nonchalant, like, oh, I'll be here all day. And literally the moment that the nurse put the stethoscope to his chest and saw the laboring breathing, it was like next room. Next nurse comes in. She's like, I'm just going to go consult with our team. I'll be right back. And I remember like literally putting the coffee up to my lips, and I couldn't even sip the coffee. And they're like, we're going to bring you to a private room. And I was like, oh, sweet. They think like I've got it all together. Like I'm VIP. And I was rushed into a resuscitation room. And a team of 12 doctors and nurses started shouting out vitals and paging cardiology and neurology. And a nurse came up to me and was like asking where dad and, your husband. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I'm not even from here. Like, what is happening? And I was like, I don't live here. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, I thought my kid was going to get a neck adjustment to align his stomach, not like, what's the vitals and the paging? And I called my husband, and my husband landed in time for the MRI. And then the CT, and then all the testing, poking, prodding. And we spent 6 days there. They essentially say to us, oh man, like we don't know what's the matter with your son. Like he doesn't have a bacterial infection. He was hooked up to antibiotics for 2 days and then they pulled him off. I was like, we're not going to pump him full of antibiotics if he's not allergic, but they were trying to get ahead of it. And the pediatric neurologist came in Winnipeg and said, oh man, I thought it would have been SMA, but it's not. And I was like, what? I was like, okay, well, if you think it is, and those that have SMA, especially as babies, will have like, they're called tongue tremors, like just this small little vibration. And I had seen it with Ashan and Shania. And what was crazy, and I think this part's in the book, but my son's thumbs looked like Ashan's thumbs, and his thumbs were just really weak. So like you kind of at rest, but Ashan's thumbs just kind of like were limp. And I was putting that together and I was like, weird. And I talked to Ashan and Shanae's mom, Karen, and I was like, she goes, Jessica, just have them tested. I was like, well, how do you test? She's like, it's a blood test. And when the pediatric neurologist said that to us, we like high five. We're like, we're out of the woods. But I'm like, no, you're only 99% sure. So let's be 100%. Like it is just a blood test. They lied to us in Winnipeg and said that they drew the blood and sent it off. They never did. We found that out when we later got back to Calgary. And Calgary basically redoes all the tests that were done at Winnipeg Children's. More pokes, more prods. And some of these tests were horrible. Like you're watching your little 2-month-old baby. They do one where they do a nerve test and they poke needles in and out of you constantly to see how the nerves respond. And they're looking to see if the nerves have died, because spinal muscular atrophy is essentially you're missing the gene that reproduces nerves. Nerves are what talk to the muscles. So when the muscles are communicated by the nerves, they know to move, or they can like point at you or do all that. That's the nerve from your brain communicating to your muscle. And so in SMA, there's SMN1 and SMN2, and the kids are missing the SMN1. So that's your like main copy. And then we have this backup copy. And you can have a multiple numbers of backup copies, and he had such a low amount. So he doesn't have the main gene to tell you to do that. And then he's so low in backup copies that the nerves are dying off. And that's why this kid was kind of limp and we hadn't noticed it, but we didn't detect it at birth. Wow. And some people would brush it off as, oh, he's just like slow in meeting his milestones. Mm-hmm. But if you'd hold him, and like, I think I was so exhausted as a mom of a 13-month-old and a newborn, you're just like, okay, kids are fed, watered, diapered. Like we're just like, you're doing this on repeat. So none of it had clicked in, and they redid all these testing. I mean, one of the one is the most horrible. My job was to hold him as still as possible, and they give him sugar water. Well, literally, you're watching them poke in and out, but he wasn't responding to that now that I could see that. So the nerves had already died off. And so those, and then you test with the blood test, and on August 5th, 2016 at Alberta Children's Hospital on Unit 3, midway through the day, Dr. Jean Ma, who is an angel sent from the heavens above. I cannot say enough good things about her as a pediatric neurologist. Very serious, not like super fun and playful, but incredibly gifted, kind, patient, wise, and peaceful. Delivered the news. And I mean, I would not want her job being like, hello, I'm your pediatric neurologist, and your kid has this rare genetic disease that there's no hope, no treatment, no cure for, and he won't make his first birthday, and our role is just going to be to keep him comfortable. And so, that is a parent's worst nightmare, 1,000%. And I remember my husband and I just crumbled to the floor. I'm just like, I don't know how long we were there for, but we were on the floor for a good chunk of time. And then you were faced with a decision of like, how is this going to play out? And I say this all the time from stage to people on other podcasts. You don't get a choice in your circumstances often, but you do get a choice in how you respond. A lot of bad things are happening to a lot of great people, and I don't wish them on anybody. And, you know, sometimes you're like, well, why did that have to happen? And I think we spend too much time trying to reckon and reconcile and reason. And I think it's such a waste of effort if we could move into like, okay, we cannot change this. And the question that I teach people to ask is like, what's your so now what? What is it? How can you... Like, okay, I wouldn't choose this. Don't want my son to die. I would love that there would be treatments like blah, blah, blah. Maybe I wish I lived in the U.S. and all these things. And so that was really where our journey skyrocketed. And when I wrote my book, I had started writing this book in 2013, 14. And it was originally about the nudges of my heart of how it led to meeting my husband. And then, you know, slowly writing it, had my daughter. We had her, like we thought we'd, you know, take some time. Then I just knew that the book had to change, and it was more so about not like my journey to meet my husband, although I do share that, and it is a really funny story because there's an amazing guy by the name of Micah who was like smelly, and bless Micah, he's the kindest soul. He is such a good human. I mean, we just were not meant to be. And then there's, you know, a guy that I dated from high school, or just after I graduated from high school, Jeff, who's his mom and dad are still neighbors with my parents, and I get to see them, and he's amazing and like the best soul. And another guy named Carlos, my Costa Rican lover, that I was convinced that I was going to move to Costa Rica and start a whitewater rafting. Like, it's a fun book, but originally it was intended to really share this journey, because I think so many females, especially myself, I grew up in a community where like you were married and started having kids at 21. Calgary, I would say, is definitely a different scene, but a Christian Mennonite community. And so just so fun of like where it took. And then it was like all of the nudges. Like I just was like, oh my gosh, like if you actually look back at your life and you're like, oh, I had this nudge to like, I just driving away. I was just at a conference for Cure SMA in the US. And I was at this incredible reception where I got to meet one of the researchers who spent 14 years developing Spinraza, which is a life-changing drug. I spent time with another researcher who is in the lab and, you know, famous around the world. And I got to have this incredible conversation with him, and I walked away. And then I was like, wait, what are you doing? I was like, nudged. I'm like, do not go back until you get a picture with this researcher. Because in 2017, I sat on that very patio, almost in the exact same spot with my husband while we were fighting for our marriage. And I was like, how full circle is it that in 2017, I'm fighting for my marriage, and we're trying to figure this out, and we're, you know, doing all this stuff now to be in the spot where yet another blessing of like meeting somebody that for 8 years, he didn't have success on what he was working on for 8 years. And I got to have a conversation, and like he found the breakthrough, and he's working on like SMA and splicing and mice. And I can't even understand their work. Like this is where I'm like, damn it, I should have paid attention to Mr. Ozzy's like, you know, science classes in high school. But it's just nuts when these like moments happen in your life. And I think some of them are as simple as sending your brother-in-law a text to, oh man, I'm in the room and I was here, and I would have never predicted that 5 years later I'm meeting researchers that are so dedicated to this life-changing work.
That's amazing.
Lewiston dies, just to close the story. Yeah, Lewiston does die. And I laugh. I use humor. It works for me, not for everybody. So if you're new here, the doctors were right. Dr. Ma is like, damn it, she is super smart. We spent like 4 months in Alberta Children's between ICU, Unit 3, and Rotary Flames. We have a hospice, one of only 7 or 8 spots in Canada that has a children's hospice. I didn't even know children's hospices were a thing, but holy shit, I'm so glad we had one. And we got the ultimate care from the team here, and I cannot say enough good things. And we made a commitment, which is why my book is called Bring the Joy. I got a nudge to say, we're going to just bring the joy to our son's life. And my son only had 179 days, and gosh, I wish it was more, but you live a lot different. Knowing that there's only 179 days left. And I think like I was like convinced throughout some parts of the journey that I was like, oh, he's going to beat this. And I remember talking with the head of ICU. I'm like, Dr. Iliad, I'm like, you're going to be at my son's baseball game, watching him round the bases. And my son doesn't get to do that, but kids that are now born with spinal muscular atrophy are able to run around the bases. And that's a pretty special spot to be, because I had this belief that it was possible, and it didn't happen for my own son, but it's happening for other kids. And yes, I'm mad and a little bit bitter about that, but I've done a lot of healing, paid a lot of therapy. I work out a lot to reconcile that. But like, how cool is it that I had that belief and it's actually now happening?
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole world with SMA. And I will say, I mean, we've raised $2.5 million with our charity. Again, counting, I want to say we've got to be close to 2.7, 2.8. But those numbers are not verified, so do not hold me until I have them verified through our accounting team. But we've raised an insane amount of money. And just this is being recorded in, what month are we? June still?
June.
Okay, yes. This is being recorded in June. And at the beginning of June 2024, I was at the Cure SMA conference, USA. They put it on and do an incredible job. And to hear what we've accomplished as a organization. And then, like, when my kid was born, there was no treatments. There's clinical trials.
Yeah.
And now there's 3 treatments. And they're talking 6 more that are muscle and nerve treatments that are like where Spinraza was when my son was born, kind of in this clinical trial stage. Now this is muscle and like nerve, that's happening. And I'm like, whoa, imagine what's going to be another. Like, I'm in my lifetime, we will see a cure. I believe kids will be fully healed from this. And I believe the advancements that are happening are insane. And I'm like, oh man, this is like really rad work where the money that's getting raised is actually like you're seeing such progress. And that's not the case for every disease or every, tough thing. And then we pour our money that we raise back into Alberta Children's Hospital because I believe in that. And then of course, coast to coast across Canada for those living with SMA, kids and adults. And it's for items like wheelchairs and accessibility to put kids in sports and to help them out with physiotherapy or elevators or lifts or ramps. And so we're really proud of the work that we've done.
Yeah.
Yes, it sucks my kid died.
Yeah.
But like, I can't change it. So this is me radically accepting where I'm at and being like, all right, what's my, so now what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then you answered one of my questions, which was like, what has your fundraising done?
Yeah.
And this is one of the things in listening to your story and watching you do. I've only been watching you for a year, but watching what you do.
Oh, you've been missing out.
I know.
So, yeah.
I'm so sad.
Follow me on social media at the Jessica Janzen. Yeah. I'm a good time.
True. And so, but for the last year, watching what you've done, and that's what I constantly go back to in my head is such incredible stuff that you've done to raise awareness and raise funds. But the other side of the internal side for you is how hard it is, I'm sure, like with your son.
Yeah.
And that's like where my heart goes all the time is like the joy you must feel, but also the heartache you feel at the exact same time is, it's incredible that you keep going. And I know that there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'd love for you to speak on it, but I just want to say that to you. Like, I see that piece, and I'm sure lots of people do, but it's incredibly brave and honorable and just amazing what you do.
I mean, I shared this reel, and one of my speaking colleagues was making fun of me. He's like, "Oh, there you are on Instagram crying again." I was like, "Frankie, shut your mouth." I don't sure that I cry that much, but I'm also trying to be really real in it because I think like my whole platform is about joy, about resiliency, about finding forward momentum. And what I know to be true is that it is really sad and really hard. And so I just shared a reel about packing for the Cure SMA conference. I did not want to go. Like I didn't pack I'm always packed the night before, be prepared. I travel for a living for my career, which is, I'm a keynote speaker. And so I'm on the road. So, there's a system to it. And I left my packing to the morning of. I was like, ugh, like every excuse. And I'm like, I literally had said, is that a tickle in my throat?
Something's here.
Right?
I have a rash. Something's happening.
Talk yourself out of being in or out of sick, where you're like, I might have a headache. Like, no, are you freaking down?
Yeah,
and
totally.
Every excuse where I was like, oh, my husband, literally was finding I got onto the plane and I just started crying. I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here.
What made you do it? What pushed you to do it?
Because I know I'm meant to. Like, I know that there's like 2 parts of your brain. One wants to keep you comfortable. And it's uncomfortable going to a conference where you're like, well, why did that kid get to live? Why did that kid get to live? Why did those people get to live? Why didn't, and she's become a near dear friend. We literally, Betty and Veronica and it's so funny. She lives in Texas. Her child's name is Luke. He is 7. or he's about to turn 8. Like Lewiston just turned 8. Our kids are 3 months apart.
I know the story. Yeah. Like, how did that, I was going to ask how
We met at the Cure SMA conference the year before, and literally our lives are carbon copies. So our daughters are the same age. Our sons that have SMA are the same age. And then we have little guys the same age. So like carbon copy families. And she started a foundation in the USA called Luke 18-1. So if you're in the US, go and check them out. Make a donation. They do incredible work. And they've raised like millions of dollars for SMA research and to change the trajectory. But I went to the conference because they had a scholarship program for first-time attendees. So I was able to access that. So I introduced myself. I kind of like saw their story, but I didn't put it together. And all of a sudden we met and we're like, oh, we're meant to be friends. Like this is like a lifelong thing. And because they lived in the U.S. and Spinraza, I mean, I'll probably get some of this wrong, but I don't know if it was FDA approved or if there was more clinical trials. Like in Canada, Spinraza was only it was called something else, nusinersen at the time, and there was all these different trials, and some kids were getting placebo and some kids, like, it wasn't there. I think they were further along in the US, and so her son Luke was just able to access it sooner, and probably not as severe as Lewiston. Lewiston was a very, like, there's type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. I mean, there's a guy at this conference, he is type 3. He's the head athletic trainer for the University of Michigan adaptable sports program, and the guy is walking, and he like, I'm like this is like, it's kind of a cool community to be part of, but I'm like, cool, just, you know, like University of Michigan is a big freaking deal. Yeah. And adaptable sports are changing, and so there's such a broad spectrum where he's still walking. Mm-hmm. He competed in, like, he does 5K races with his daughter. Like, he's doing incredible things. So the difference between my son and Nicole's son from Luke 18-1 and their foundation, our journeys were just different. And he was able to get Spinraza, probably wasn't as weak. I mean, Lewiston caught a cold. It's a respiratory thing. You need your muscles to be able to cough and clear your throat and all of that. So, but we've bonded over it, and it's incredible to see. And I always say, God knew I couldn't handle like a medically fragile child. So he's like, you'll have this for 6 months and then he's going to die, and we're going to give you another area to focus your energy on. So I was like, okay, got the memo. Here we go. I mean, that's how I rationalize it and piece of it for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just talking about not that specifically, but that thing is when things happen to us, we can, like you said before, we can choose what we see it as. Like there's still heart in that, but we can choose what's the reason. Not why did, not there's a not everything happens for a reason, but there can be a reason for everything that happens. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it's about shifting your perspective of like, I'm punished. This is like, I'm sentenced. This is the worst thing. Or you can change that message and that story that you're telling yourself and shift perspective. And for me, it was like, oh, I just got really fortunate. People sometimes wait their whole life to wonder what their purpose is or their calling, and they don't get it. And what a blessing. I'm like, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Do I enjoy it all the time? Fuck no. I would not choose this, like, it wouldn't be like, oh, me over here, I'll take the kid that dies. Like, you know, I think when you have these assignments and you think about purpose, and I mean, and then my husband and I have talked about it, and it sounds crazy. We're like, I don't know if we could picture our life any other way, because our marriage is more full. It's more abundant. There's more grace in it for each other. I show up as a better parent because of it. I think I'm a better friend. There's lots of things to that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, like, it's just one of those things, like, yeah, there's great things. And this is maybe, I don't know if this is a good thing to say or a bad thing to say, but, like, if we can learn those lessons without those losses.
I'm like, don't wait for your kid to die before you start living a full abundant life that is joyful on purpose.
You said that when we were at your event in January, you said that, and I was like, goosebumps. I was like, when you said that, I was like, like, full goosebumps.
I think I would have played it small or not reached my fullest potential and what I'm capable of had Lewiston not died.
Holy crap.
Like, I think I would have stayed stuck, or maybe I wouldn't have discovered it. And so what a blessing that in my 30s, I'm like, I believe I'm living as big, as bold. And I hope when people hear this on their side, like, I'm a big, bold personality. Like, that's who I am. Not everyone needs to be big, bold personalities, but I think it's like, what's your definition of making the most out of it? And it could be in a small and simple way. For the arena that I'm in, like, it's a big and ginormous and, like, you know, effervescent, in your face, confident. That's not for everyone, but the message that I'm trying to communicate is like, whatever you're doing, whatever you're called to do, wherever you are, go in on that thing in a big way. Don't waste those moments.
Yeah.
And some of my moments aren't necessarily on a stage or at a fundraiser. They can be in the moments of maybe like putting my daughter to bed. But being present, being focused, being intentional, bringing the joy and the stuff. And that is some of the quiet work. And so your life doesn't have to look like mine. I'd love to abundantly set that. There's not one way to do this. There's a way that's going to work best for you and your family. But go do that thing in a big and bold and present way.
Yeah.
So cool.
Absolutely. God, your messages are so good.
I love it.
They're so good. What's your biggest hope to see with SMA and all the fundraising that you do? A cure.
Yeah.
Okay.
That no family would ever have to experience loss. No family would ever have to walk through what we walk through. And I would say it's twofold. Not only is it for the kids that will be born, but it's also that there's more hope for the adults living with it. And that hope is more accessibility, which I saw at this conference, like Delta Flight products.
Oh my gosh, that's
so cool.
the airplane one.
Yeah. And I'm like, how have we not figured this out? Like, I'm like, we're putting people on the freaking moon and we're getting them into outer space, but we can't get someone living in a wheelchair. And not just for SMA, like accessibility as a whole.
Yeah.
Like this is stuff that, like, why should they miss out on opportunities?
100%.
And even, I mean, I'm guilty of just not knowing until you know. I used to be the person that was like, oh, I'm just going to jam into a wheelchair accessible spot because I'm only going to be 5 minutes. Like, I don't even touch it now because I'm like, it is a big deal. This does matter. So it's also this second piece of better access and accessibility for those living with it that maybe don't have hope of a cure, but that they can have their lives to the fullest. And you're seeing Corona, I think the beer company, is doing all these like beach walkways like that are making things
So
accessible.
cool.
Like people are stepping up. So I think it's
yeah.
Corona if it's a different company, but I remember being a beer company. I'm like, how does this align with a beer company? And I'm like, whatever, I'm here for it because if it means people that are, and it's not just those living with SMA, it's those living with, CP, it's those living, from, accidents or other diseases or other changes. Like, how can we ensure that they can be included and that there's accessibility for all? And that is something else I hope for.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
I saw that reel with oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart. His name. Shane? They're a couple. Yeah, is it Shane? Yeah. Yes, Shane and Hannah. Oh my gosh, they're like so. I've been following them for a while too because I'm so inspired. But that reel of him backing into the air, I was like, oh, did I send that to you? Of him like backing into the airplane thing? Oh my gosh, I was like,
It's wild.
And my thought when I saw that reel, I was like, how is this 2024? How am I seeing this in 2024? And I didn't see this 20 years ago, like, or more. Like,
and
what?
it's like you don't know what you don't
Wild.
know.
Yes, totally.
So I'd rather not fault people, but I just hope that like this conversation is like, hey, just pay attention.
Yeah.
Even in like, I've taken a Sean to a few of the NHL Flames games, and you know what it's like walking in our arena and all of that at the Saddle Dome, and people are so ignorant and oblivious. But then I'm like, okay, I don't want to fault you because you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. But if you know better, do better. So can you be observant for those that maybe are not able-bodied, have two legs? Can we make more room? Can we be a little bit more thoughtful, extend a little bit more grace, and not be so focused on our own selves to be able to help and serve?
Yeah.
100%.
And then extending beyond that, exactly that is if we just, like you said it much better, but remove ourselves from our situation and just think about how does what I do impact somebody else, whether that's somebody in a wheelchair or just another person in general. Like, you can make the tiniest difference if you just like think, I'm in a rush, I just need to do this, and think, okay, but like, can I do something else in my rush that I can still get done when I'm done without inconveniencing other people?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask, like, what's one thing, if there is something you haven't said yet, that you really want people to know about SMA?
I think you're probably listening to this and you don't ever think it'll happen to you, and then it does. And maybe it's not SMA, but maybe it's something. And so for me, the one thing that I want people to know about SMA is like, not only is it might not happen to you or it won't happen to you, but it would just be to be aware of the gifts and the blessings that you have been given. How can you use those to help make the world a better place? And it was SMA that led me to being a little bit more gracious, a little bit more generous, a little bit more aware, tuned in to those things. And so I think I don't expect people to go and do a deep dive on SMA, but there is so much hope in this community, and there has been so much advancements. And so it's more so just about, I hope that when you've heard of SMA, that might be the one thing that just got you to think a little bit differently, to show up a little bit better.
That's a really good
cool.
message. Yeah.
That's so
Thank you.
cool.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, so I'm taking a bit of a
Let's go, turn it.
I'm taking
Shift
a horse
it. We're
pin
shifting,
turn.
everybody. Come with us. Yeah.
come along for the ride. Okay, so I was thinking this the other day, and I was like, as I'm preparing this conversation, and the one thing that kind of, I mean, there were a lot of things that popped into my brain when I was listening to your book, but here's one thing I would love to know. Your inner narrative. So like, you're in a hard moment.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has hard moments.
Yeah.
You're in a hard moment. And I think the other day you were on stories or something and you were saying like, this day sucks. Something is going on. There's lots happening. I'm butchering it. You didn't say this day sucks, but you're like, this is a hard day.
Yeah.
On days that are hard, in like really hard moments or somewhat hard moments, and you're turning it around to find the joy. Mm-hmm. What are you telling yourself in that moment? Like in the moment, what's your inner narrative that stops you from going down the the pity party mode, and what turns you into the dance party mode? Like, what is the thing that you're saying to yourself, if there is a thing?
No, I mean, I love that. And I think it's such a great question. And so if you follow me on social, or you've read a part of my book, and the chapter that I wrote about, so I struggle with mental health. I had attempted suicide in grade 11 year. It was dark. And you wouldn't suspect it, because I'm like a pretty easygoing, like I had a good life. I had a loving family. Like there was nothing wrong. I had gotten dumped by this guy that I was dating. And, I think it just like that led to like more evidence of like, oh, you're not worthy. You're not meant to be here. So this conversation of, I think it can be really easy to hear a bunch of thoughts and voices. And so again, I address this in my keynote because I really wanted to understand some of the science and how this works. So we get about 60,000 thoughts a day. That's a study out of Stanford that basically says we have these 60,000 thoughts a day. 80 to 90% of them could be repetitive, which you'll go look in the mirror. You'll say this, oh, my cellulite and those varicose veins, like my brain does it. I get it. And then not all of them are true. Like thoughts for me, which I have thought is like, you're not worthy, you're stupid, your ideas aren't good, like it's never going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, so why would it happen now? Like all of that stuff can be there. So for me, when I start to have those darker days as I'm navigating my own mental health journey, and some of it is really dark and some of it is just like the regular bullshit of like, just struggling in life and doing things and it not working out the way you thought it would. So because I have to be really tuned in for myself not to spiral and get really, really low, because that is a very scary place where I do have suicidal ideations and where I struggle to, it's that much harder for me to come up and out of it, which is why I believe my platform is joy, because I know that there's breakthrough in that. So when I know that I'm starting to go low, the scales are starting to tip, and it isn't just like dance party vibes and all of that. Probably one of the very first things that I've learned that works for me is to communicate that to somebody that I know, trust, and is a part of my inner circle of the people that sit at my table. And that's just so that I don't feel alone, and so that there's like awareness of it, of just like, okay, I mean, thankfully I can tell my husband, and we've found a rhythm. There's a few friends that are like my speed dial where, I text the fire truck or ambulance emoji, and they know that then that means they got to pick up the call and I need them. I think Simon Sinek does this beautiful thing, and you would have seen it floating around, is sometimes all we need is 8 minutes for someone to listen to us. So it's like, who's your 8-minute person that you can have that? So that's really part of the very first steps. And then I reflect inward, and it's like asking some tough questions of like, okay, what's my sleep like? What's my like health? How am I feeling my body? Have I been exercising? What's my stress load? What are my cortisol? Like all of those things. And it can often be like, oh, well, no shit, you're exhausted. Or it can be like, oh, I'm in my luteal phase. It could just be like a hormonal thing. Then it could be like, oh, like you haven't gotten your workout in 4 days, and you're really like, I'm very, committed to 4 or 5 days of very intentional, heavy weights, moving my body and all of that. And so really just being like, okay, what's working, what's not working. And then it's like, okay, well then identifying what has maybe led to or causing that. And it could just be your circumstances. Like I've been in a year of some major friendships shifting and changing. And so there's a lot of grief in that. And then like you have a tough conversation, you're like, what? You know, and you're just like, oh, I didn't think about that or that. And so it can spark things inside of you. And I go back to gratitude and some journaling. Like that is a huge piece for me. So that's already like trying to help my brain find the evidence of what's good. Because when you're in a bad position or the mental, stuff is really heavy and dark, it's like, okay, you can't be anxious and grateful at the same time. Okay, you can't be, in the darkness and be really full of gratitude. And so it's like finding those things. And as a coach, I coach my one-on-one clients about being very specific in gratitude. And some of them that are struggling and just like not where they want to be, I'm like, we start with gratitude. Start with gratitude. And it's like, well, send me your gratitude list. And it's like, I'm thankful for my husband, my kids, and my house. And it's like, no, no, like, sorry. And it's like, I'm thankful for the mug that I got to have my coffee in because it tastes the best when it's in this certain mug. Oh man, I'm thankful that I was able to get out of bed and I didn't even think about wiping my butt because I've got these strong, amazing legs at work, like being so specific. And so there's a gratitude piece in that. But it's really just kind of going through the checklist of like, what's my sleep like? What's my eating like? What's my like connection like? And I really do believe in the power of prayer, and then having people to walk alongside you and hold you accountable is really, really critical.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're like, get curious about how you're feeling. Like you're not just going to go, oh, no, I'm going to ignore that feeling. Like you're like diving into it.
And one of the things that one of my really good friends, Vic, always does is she goes like, what is the darkness telling you? And then she's like, I'm going to tell you what the actual truth is. So it's like having somebody reflect back. And we had this conversation at this speaking training that I was at. They had done this exercise as a group of friends, and they were a group of like grown dudes. We're like, what are you telling yourself? And then the friend spoke and said, here's what I'm going to tell you, what I see and what's true. And if you need somebody to do that, like, and that's why I'm so intentional about who sits at my table and who I'm cultivating a space with. Like, what are they saying about me? And not only what are they saying about me in front of me, but behind my back.
Absolutely.
And like, those are the people that then you need to draw on and speak on, because when you don't have the strength to do it on your own, you got to lean on somebody else. Now, I believe in God, go to church, love Jesus. I don't believe I can do any of this without his strength and his power. And that's my own personal choice. But I also believe like we're not meant to do this journey alone. We're equipped with amazing people. And one of my favorite quotes says, it's not the burden that breaks us down, or it's not the load that breaks us down. It's the way we carry it. It's a Lou Holtz quote. And you're like, oh, right. Like you could say, oh my gosh, well, her life was super shitty and she had this kid die and that's why I'm like, I don't carry that load on my own. Like, I'm not sure if you noticed, there was almost like 300-400 people at Lewiston's party. Like I've got 400 people rallying and holding the weight of his death, of the hard day around me. And I'm like, hi, me over here. I don't want to carry this on my own. And people are good, so they'll help come carry the load. And if you're in a dark place, you can be like, it's dark, it's heavy, it's hard. And I'm like, okay, I'll come carry that. And my favorite thing, which you will see me start blasting this, but it's like when you don't have the belief that it's possible to do the thing that you want or to get out of the tough spot, that's when you need to borrow somebody's belief until yours catches up.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Bam. I love that.
Yeah.
You talked about in your book, you talked about the Start Today journal.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that was a moment for me because I used to do those all the time. And then I forgot about it. And I haven't been doing it. And I'm like, oh, I got to start that again. Do you still do that every day?
I don't.
Do you do like, what is your morning?
Oh God, I hate that you asked me this question because I'm actually in a weird spot. So I would say that one of my biggest, and I'll just be super vulnerable and authentic, I had a dialed morning routine. Dialed. And I'm in a season where it isn't dialed. And I think it's because I'm in another season of, especially coming out of Lewiston season, we call it Lewiston season, where it's like April, May, June, super crazy, all the events, like really full schedules. And so like some things like they get dropped or like get let go of, but finding a new routine, I still do a lot of those things, but they necessarily don't go in the morning that I had. So Rachel Hollis had come up with the Start Today journal where you wrote 5 things you're grateful for and the 10 things that you're working on. And I did that religiously. I even had a board made up in my office.
Cool.
I'm not doing that as religiously as I was. was. I think part of it too, like when everything happened, if I'm being honest, I was I went to her marriage conference, and if nobody knows the story, Rachel and Dave Hollis were together. Their conference changed mine and my husband's life. And then a few years later, they announced that they're getting divorced. And then a year or two later after that, unfortunately, Dave Hollis passes away. And
I did not know he passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew all the other information.
Shocking.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
it was-
not like of natural causes, unfortunately.
Oh, I did not know that.
And so there was, and I think I'm fair to say this. I mean, the work that she did, I needed it at that exact time. And I don't know if I want to say I worshiped the ground, but I really took seriously a lot of what she was doing. And I got to see her just as, girl, wash your face, really started to take off, and the traction. And I think I was just really bummed and disappointed, and I'm allowed to have those feelings and fear.
100%.
And so I think part of that has just kind of been to like, well, I'm going to do it my own way. And I also think some of those, and I mean, she shared this. She's like, there's seasons of your life where that type of morning routine or that doesn't work out if you have a newborn baby or, whatever that looks like. So I've imparted a lot of those tools and things, and I still do them, but not in that like very vigilant way.
Totally.
Yeah.
I resonate with that. I used to do their morning show and stuff, and I was the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was the same. I kind of was like, I hit this moment where I was like, I don't feel like I need that anymore. Like, I got this. And then I had another moment where I was like, should I go back to that? Do I need to do that? And then I think sometimes it's everything in the right season, in the right time, right?
Totally. And I think even for people, like they'll be like, people are like, oh, I used to follow you. And I'm like, okay, they don't follow me now. Like I might not be in the season. And I think that's a cool part is like use your discernment for where it's at. And so that is exactly what I needed in that season. And then there was a little bit of hurt and rebellion where I was like, what? Like, and you questioned, was that fake or was that, and I don't believe it was fake. I think that there was tons of love, but yeah, I was hurt and bummed and there was grief and sadness and loss in there. Like,
Totally.
I mean, I had texted with Dave Hollis. They gave me tickets to their thing because we named our kid after them. Like it was wild. And so there was some definite like sadness in that. But again, it's like I'm in control of my life. I'm not in control of other people's. And I had some lady be like, are you worried about your own marriage because their marriage? I know. And I was like, no, because my marriage isn't Rachel and Dave Hollis's responsibility.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility.
Yeah, totally.
And I learned a lot of good things from them. And we're human. So people are going to make mistakes and going to fall. Like if people are expecting me to be perfect and like, well, Jessica was an idiot or Jessica said something bad, I'm like, please do not follow me because I will not be able to be perfect. I will not be able to live up to this insane expectation. Like I remember reading Will Smith's book right after he had punched, was it Chris? Who did he punch in the face? Chris Rock?
I think it was Chris Rock. Yeah.
And someone was like, oh, how dare you support Will Smith? I'm like, okay, so like because Will Smith did one bad thing publicly, which was captured because he has a large following, now we just are going to cancel Will Smith? No, he's human. He was in the moment enraged. I do dumb stuff all the time. I yell at my husband and say mean things. I mean, it's just not publicized.
You just have less cameras on you.
Right. Yeah. And so I think I hope that we can create a culture where we allow people to stumble, fail, get it wrong, and give them grace to come back and correct it. Now, in how you correct it and how you come back from it, that's a big deal. But I'm like not going to not read Will Smith's book or see a movie just because like he's done one bad thing. We're human. We're all going to get it wrong. Yeah. And it's like, but I think it's about how can we extend grace, which is unmerited, undeserving favor.
Totally.
And I extend that to other people because I want them to extend it to me.
Well, and that's the thing. If you're not a public figure, you don't have video cameras in your face all the time. Well, you do, but they're less likely to care about you. And I don't mean that rudely. But so people aren't trying to capture everything that you do. But the more of a public figure you become, the more of your mistakes get caught on camera.
Totally.
The rest of us are just
and the more
blessed to
people
not have
feel
that.
like they have the ability and the right to say stuff into your life.
Oh my gosh, right?
I think also what you were saying, you were saying about the conference is like people being like, oh, like their marriage advice was bad because they had a divorce. And I'm like, people can have good advice and still not succeed in the area they were initially talking about.
Yeah.
100%.
Like, just for a really small example, we bartended this pub and there was this guy that came in there. I've never seen him have a successful relationship in the time I knew him till he was like 43, I think, last time I saw him. But I remember in my early 20s, he said to me like some derivative, he was very drunk, but he said to me some derivative of, you can't date someone who takes your light away. You have to date someone who makes your light shine brighter. And I'm like, I've never seen him have a successful relationship, but that is a really good piece of advice.
So powerful. And maybe because he hasn't had a successful relationship is maybe the reason why he knows that to be true.
Yeah.
And maybe his timing is just he hasn't found the person that helps him shine his light.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where we have to offer this grace, unmerited, undeserving favor for people to meet them where they're at, because you don't know his story. Like, we don't know that. And maybe he did have that and somebody passed away. Maybe he had that and like it just like I mean, that's what this journey of like my own son of passing away, of, you know, serving the spinal muscular atrophy community and all that. It's just taught me, like, I remember being in the Apple store and Lewiston got the diagnosis and I couldn't get my phone to work and we had all these medical appointments. This was right at the beginning. I was a lunatic in the Apple store. And I finally burst into tears and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm such a crazy person. But I said, my son just got this diagnosis that he's going to die and I'm so overwhelmed. And all of a sudden, because I was like, no, you have to fix it. It has to be fixed today. I'm not leaving the store. You guys have to. And I was so, like, I'm not normally like that. And the moment that, like, I just shared, like, because they didn't know 5 hours earlier that I had been given this diagnosis and that my phone wasn't working. And they're just like, hey, we have a policy. We have to close the store if we can't fix it. And all of a sudden, it just drops everybody's shoulders. And I'm just like, I want to meet people assuming the best of them, which is like, man, maybe they just had someone get diagnosed with cancer. Man, maybe they just came out of a funeral. Man, maybe they just got, you know, fired from a job. You don't know what people are walking through. So if we can just assume the best and then extend that grace, game changer.
Yeah. Ask the person if they're okay, if they seem like they're not.
Yeah.
Because there's probably a reason. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that perspective so much.
Yeah, it's so good. I don't know if I want to ask this question because everything you just said was really good, but the question I wanted to wind up with, that we usually wind up with, was if you could go back to whether it's Jessica when you first had the diagnosis from Lewiston or when he first passed away, what is it something that you would say to yourself in that period of time?
It's going to turn out better than you thought it would.
Well, and can I ask why that would have been impactful for you then?
Because you look at all the reasons of how your life is going to suck. You think about every worst case scenario. When you get delivered a death sentence or really hard news, we don't often play out, what if this is going to change our life and my marriage is going to be more fulfilled and I'm going to have these incredible opportunities and the things that I've dreamed about in my business are going to take off and flourish and my friendships are going to be abundant and I'm just going to like live my most authentic self, and then so it's going to be the most freeing, the most liberating. Like, I did not say that when they're like, hey, I just didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't. I was just like, my life sucks. This is over. Like, what the fuck's happening?
Yeah.
And I'm in a position, like, I took a video on my phone in the Detroit airport with my awesome, you know, carry-on suitcase and my thing, wearing a blazer that I just love and adore. And it sounds so stupid, but these little things that, like, I'm like, where I've dreamed about and pictured and envisioned my life to be. I was in the Detroit airport in the Delta terminal, which is beautiful and stunning. If you've ever been to, I'm a huge fan of Detroit now. So Detroit, you rock. But I was in the airport and I was just like, whoa, this is good. Wouldn't choose it necessarily the way that it's all unfolded, but I'm like, I get to do what I love. I'm meeting the most amazing people with the most amazing stories from around the world. I love traveling. I love exploring. I love that opportunity. I get to do that. And I'm coming home to a home that is far from perfect and chaotic and messy in its own beautiful way. But I have a husband that loves and adores me. And I have these kids. And it's not how I pictured it or what I thought it was going to be. But it's beautiful and good. And that was something that I have learned through losing Lewiston to spinal muscular atrophy.
Incredible. Do I have time for one more question?
Get it.
Okay. Can you talk to us about how you talk to your other children about Lewiston and how you keep Lewiston in their life?
Totally.
Good question.
Yeah. I mean, I love that question. It's a conscious choice that we decided. And I feel so fortunate because I think my parents' generation, they're known as the silent generation. Like, oh, we don't talk about that. Don't bring that up.
Yep.
Or it's too difficult or whatever. And even my girlfriend, Nicole and Daniela from the Luke 18-1 Foundation, they talked about having cleanup conversations. Like when you're going through something tough, especially in the family, they're like, oh, we just have to have a cleanup conversation. I know. Is that not so good?
So good.
And I just learned this like a week ago. I was like, oh shit. I was like, that's great. Hey, can we just have a cleanup conversation? Because that was like really messy. And my husband and I fought about something last night. You know, I remember being like, fine, let's just go to bed. We're both exhausted. This isn't going to go anywhere. And he made a beautiful effort by being like, hey, can we meet for lunch? And I was like, no, my schedule's jammed. See you when you get home. Love you. Like,
sorry, Ronnie, we've taken your lunch date with your wife.
Yeah. But I think that was his effort in making up a cleanup conversation. And like, we know like it wasn't that big of a deal, but I was just like, you know, I was telling myself a story. He's telling himself a story, and we both know. But like, how powerful is this? Like, hey, just so that this doesn't go undone. And I would almost look at it, I think a lot of what we do are these constant cleanup conversations, but I think it's conversations and being open and willing. And I want my kids to know, hey, this is hard on mom. Hey, this is what grief looks like. I want them to know that you can have joy and grief and they can coexist. I want them to know that they can go through hard things and there's a way out and through them. I want them to see what it looks like to rally community and to have people help carry the load when it gets too heavy. And so what an honor and a privilege. We have conversations in Lewiston season like, hey, you don't always get the best version of mommy, and I'm sorry for that. Or I'm not always going to be home. And I mean, I had gone to the SMA conference. I got home late on Sunday night. I woke up my son from bed. My daughter wasn't home. She was having a sleepover with my mother-in-law. And then I flew out. I got in Sunday night, home all day Monday, flew out early on Tuesday. And my kids are like, Mom, do you have to go again? I was like, Mom gets to go and do this work. And I want them to know that they can chase their dreams and that like this is the importance and this is how we honor and love on Lewiston. And so we have his picture up and we try to involve them in the event so that they can understand it. This was the first year that they came to Lewiston's party because it's a gala. It's for adults only. They stayed longer than they should have. That's a whole nother conversation. My son puked all over the dance floor. The joy to the world. It was a time. Anyways,
we did not see that.
So I'm so glad. And my daughter comes running out while the red carpet is lined up with people. Mom, you'll never believe it. Hollis puked everywhere on the dance floor. And as a mom, you're like, you listen, you little shits, don't say anything. Like we're trying to like have this elevated like. Yeah, anyways, and then you're like, this is motherhood at its finest. I'm like, go get out of here. And then I'm like, why didn't the nanny take the kids home on time? And like, why is this happening? And there's just, I'm like, who's managing things? And, I mean, that is just like it. And so in that, I also was like, I want them to see this as a positive thing, not as something that we dread. And I wanted them to see something. This was one of our first years where Ronnie and I were just such a cohesive team. And that hasn't been the way. Normally in this season, we're at each other. We're really short. We're not supportive. We're yippy. And so we're really just being conscious like, hey, this is a season. And I want our kids to see that like the pain can be the thing that brings you closer together, doesn't drive a wedge. And that's a story that you tell yourself. And so we honor him. We'll set a place for him at Christmas and Thanksgiving and these special events. And we try to make these small little moments that they can be a part of it. And they've just picked it up. Like Swayze was drawing chalk and she drew a picture of Lewiston in the family picture. You know, because we take family pictures, we bring a picture frame of him. And so there's just these like moments that I would just encourage. Yes, they're hard. And no, it's not how I want it to be, but it's how it is. And so the radical acceptance piece of this is what we are dealt. So we're just going to choose to make it amazing and awesome with what we have.
What a blessing they have to go through that with you.
Yeah.
Like for them to witness you and the way that you and Ronnie are navigating this that's such a blessing for them to witness the highs and the lows.
Totally.
Absolutely. Right?
And like, thank God, I think that they were young when we were really in the thick of it, like
right.
yelling in the fights, because hopefully they don't remember that. I hope that they see more of this, but I also hope that they see that like we are allowed to disagree. We're allowed to have different feelings on things and we can hold space. It can be both and.
Yeah, I like that. Duality seems to be this is like a common theme in these conversations lately. Did she draw him in the frame? Or did she draw him not in the frame?
She drew him with angel wings. Yeah. Yeah. So cool. And they're like, when we're driving, they're like, oh, Mom. And, you know, there's a big thunderstorm. Lewiston's bowling up in heaven. Like, you're like, yes. And we're like, and then, you know, the big one comes and you're like, oh, he must have gotten a strike there. Like, just like great ways.
That's
and
beautiful.
It's like a neat way. Or like if something really cool happens, we'll be like, oh, that's Lewiston showing up. So it looks different.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you to spend your time with us today and be so gracious with your time and coming here and even agreeing to doing this. I know this is a big deal. I know that your time is so valuable and we're just like...
we don't take this for granted.
We do not take this for granted.
I'm so grateful and I am always so grateful It means a lot. There's 8 billion people on the planet and we all have a story. And so when someone does give me the opportunity to be able to share Lewiston's story and the lessons that we've learned, which I know by ensuring them, my only hope is that people know that they don't have to be perfect. It's going to be messy. It's going to be hard, but to also know that there's joy. And so if this just helps one person shift their perspective, show up a little bit differently, go after their dreams that maybe they've been sitting on or been idling on, I encourage them that hopefully this just sparks something, puts a nudge back on their heart, and they put their foot on the gas pedal to go after it. And I don't take this for granted because you can have anybody on. And so thank you for that. And thank you for being cheerleaders. I mean, you had this award. I don't know how many times you shared about the party. And in that, for me, it was like you had the belief that the party was going to be awesome. But I had moments and hours and days where I was like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. No one's going to buy tickets. Like, this is so dumb. And it's like, I could borrow your belief because, and that,
yay.
like, it's a powerful piece, right? And so, like, honestly, you have no idea, like, how much that means to me when other people are holding the belief and I don't have it. And I go in and out of belief. I wish I could be like, every day I have all this belief and it's perfect and rah, rah, rah. It's like, I still go through, why are you doing this? This is stupid. And so thank you for being believers. Thank you for being a part of community. And thank you for using your platform to help others learn about spinal muscular atrophy. I think it's more common than people know it to be. I know there's lots of adults, even in Alberta, that I don't know of, who I haven't met. And, you know, they say 1 to 3 babies a year will be born with SMA in our province. That's why we focused on newborn screening so significantly.
I love that's so incredible that you did that.
Sitting at that party, and by the way, we were so grateful to come. We were so grateful to come. One day we'll tell you the story about, but I know we're tight here. Sitting in the party when the live auction started, we were in awe. Like, sitting there and watching that go down. Was the coolest thing to witness live. Like, we were like, and I don't know that there's ever been a time that I have been a part of witnessing an event like that, a charitable event where people are donating funds, where the evidence of those funds making a difference were so tangible. Like, watching that happen in real time, we were like, I was just like goosebumps the whole time. Watching that go down was just so freaking cool. Like, the amount of money that gets raised by this is so
by 99% of people who don't have spinal muscular atrophy, or maybe even know somebody that has it, but they're coming. Like, and I know there's a group from this other Calgary, like, they just asked their group of neighbors to come, and like they've never known us personally. We don't have dinner, we don't interact with them, and they come every year, and they are major contributors and supporters. Shout out to Lauren and Lindsay and their full group of friends. And I want to say all of their names, but I will get it wrong, so I'm just shout out to the Auburn Bay people that come, and there's a huge group of them, and like,
so cool.
They never even met Lewiston. Like, you know what I mean? And like, I'm not good friends with half of the people that they bring. Like, I don't even remember all their names. Yeah. But to see random strangers, and we've gotten that compliment a few times. And I would say that's what I love the most, is that you can see tangibly when you make a donation how it will benefit and bless other people. Yeah. And that for me is like, we're doing great work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you are.
That's really powerful. So
thank you totally so much.
Oh my gosh, we're so grateful.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah,
for real.
And on that note, if you feel moved or nudged, you can make a donation in honor of SMA Awareness Month. Also, I don't know when this is airing, but on August 17th, my 40th birthday is August 7th. I will be at the lake with my mom and dad and my kids and my hubby, Lord willing. So on August 17th, we're hosting an event at High Fitness at McMahon Stadium, and my goal is to raise $40,000 for spinal muscular atrophy and our foundation, Love for Lewiston, to bless families, babies, adults, children living with SMA and the hospital, because I love what they do. So if anyone wants to join, I confirmed pricing, but I think tickets are $20 or $25, or you can do a donation. But I would love to. People are like, what are you doing for your 40th? I'm like, I just want to raise $40,000 and have a dance party, which is High Fitness.
Yes,
one of the best workouts, and you don't have to know High Fitness. Just come and move, and it's a great time. Plus, it's at McMahon, so it's going to be awesome.
So cool.
We will make sure this airs before then.
Thank you. I'm like, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so cool. Okay, and your book, Bring the Joy,
on Amazon. Yep.
Okay, finding you on Instagram.
The Jessica Janzen, Janzen. You can find me. I'm there. Come follow, share, like, comment, do all the things, because it helps.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Love for Lewiston.
Yeah.
At Love
it's
for
just
Lewiston.
at Love for Lewiston, and Lewiston is Lewiston. I'm sure you'll put in the show notes.
Yes, we will. Yeah. And then your playbook, is it available? Like, can people buy it?
I mean, I've updated my website, and we actually just rebranded the whole playbook. But yes,
So
there's
cool.
a playbook. It's over 70 pages of tools and resources that I teach on, and that will help get you to your front foot, help you find forward momentum, help you bring the joy again if you're kind of feeling stuck or in darkness. It's like simple,
awesome.
practical tools. And I also do coaching, one-on-one coaching. I mean, it's a higher price point ticket, but if women are like serious about like, I'm ready to change my life, I'm putting skin in the game, I'm going to invest in myself, I also do that. And then keynote speaking, and that's for everything from women's wellness. I do a lot of corporate work about how do we become resilient, what tools do we need to apply to every day so that we can become the best versions, prevent burnout, and make the most of what we're given. So if you need a keynote speaker, that's also, I love that work.
You have a goal of 50 this year, right?
I sure do.
And where are you at right now?
I have 26 booked, but only 24 of those fall within 2024.
Okay.
So I'm basically needing another 26, I think, booked and delivered.
All right.
And that was a goal to... I mean, very candidly, I'd say I'm in my unfucker family era of just some like bad financial things, and COVID was really hard. We're both in small business, and so we did not sail through. It was really tough strategically. And so that's the goal, and I'm going after it, and I believe it's possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank
That was
you.
so
I
good.
love it so much. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. To help support the growth of this podcast, please feel free to leave us a review, follow us on socials, or recommend us to your friends. Your support honestly means the world to us. With love, Sammy and Melissa.